Aloha and welcome back to the Sirens Circle. I'm Alicia Marie and I am so glad that you're on for episode 2. If you listened to last week's episode on intuition, thank you for being here and tuning back in. And if this is your first time joining the circle, welcome. You picked a really good week to show up because we are talking about something that is happening right now. Mercury retrograde in Pisces. So, Mercury went retrograde on February 26th, which means if you're listening to this as it's being released, we are currently in it. If you've been feeling a little foggy, a little confused, maybe your thoughts are swimming through water instead of on solid ground, you're definitely not imagining it. That is the energy with this retrograde. But here's the thing. Mercury retrograde has a reputation, right? Everybody panics, the memes start to fly in, people are backing up their phones, avoiding their exes, refusing to sign anything. And look, I totally get it. Mercury retrograde can be chaotic, but it's not just chaos for chaos's sake. There is actually a purpose to this energy. And when you understand what's really happening, you can work with it instead of against it. This particular retrograde is happening in Pisces, the most intuitive, emotional, dreamy, boundary dissolving sign of the zodiac. So, if you thought Mercury retrograde was just about your emails getting lost and your flights being delayed, we are about to go way deeper than that. Today, we are going to talk about what Mercury retrograde actually is and debunk some of those myths that make everyone kind of spiral. We're going to dive into the specific energy of Mercury in Pisces and why this retrograde feels so different from the others. We're going to look at all the other major planetary movements happening during this retrograde because, hey, spoiler alert, there are a lot of those going on. Mars is entering Pisces. We have a lunar eclipse in Virgo. Venus is entering Aries. Jupiter is going direct. And we even have a new moon in Pisces right before the spring equinox. It is packed and it's really happening in just a few weeks. And then we're going to talk about how to actually navigate this time, what to do, what to avoid, and how this retrograde can be a gift if you know how to use it. But before we dive in, I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by the Magic Siren. If you've been wanting to learn tarot, now is the perfect time. Enrollment is now open for the next tarot workshop starting on April 1st, and early bird pricing is available until March 13th. This is a deep dive into the cards, your intuition, and how to read for yourself and others with confidence. You can find all the details at themagicsiren.com. And as always, listeners of the Siren Circle can enjoy 10% off any personal reading, whether you want an emailed reading or a live session. Just use the code SirensCircle at checkout at themagicsiren.com. All right, now let's go ahead and get into this Mercury retrograde. So let's start by talking about what everyone thinks Mercury retrograde is. Because if you've spent any time on social media or talking to people about astrology, you've probably heard some version of this. Mercury retrograde is when everything goes wrong. Your technology breaks. Your ex are going to text you. Your car is going to stop working. Don't sign any contracts. Don't make any big decisions. Why don't we just hide under a blanket until it's over? And look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that none of that happens because it does. Mercury retrograde has a reputation for a reason, but the fear and the panic around it, I feel, is a little bit overboard. So let's talk about why all of these things are actually happening and what's actually happening as a whole. Mercury retrograde is an optical illusion. From our perspective here on Earth, Mercury appears to be moving backward in the sky. It's not actually moving backwards. It's just an illusion created by the way that the planets orbit the sun at different speeds. But in astrology, we pay attention to these apparent movements because they reflect energetic shifts that we feel here on Earth. Mercury rules communication, thinking, processing information, technology, travel, and contracts. It is the planet of the mind, the messenger. So when Mercury goes retrograde, all of those areas tend to slow down. They get a little fuzzy. Things that usually move forward start to loop back. And that's where the re words come in, the RE words. Mercury retrograde is about reflection, revision, reassessment, and return. It's a time to go back over things, to revisit, to rethink, to redo. The reason Mercury retrograde gets such a bad reputation is because we live in a culture that values speed and forward momentum. We are conditioned to constantly be producing, moving forward, and making progress. And Mercury retrograde says, actually, let's slow down a little bit. Let's look back and review what you've already done. And when we resist that energy, when we try to push forward anyway, that's when chaos tends to happen. That's when the emails don't send. That's when your flights get delayed. That's the miscommunications that start to pile up. Because the universe is trying to get us to slow down, and we might not be listening. But here's the gift of Mercury retrograde: it gives us an invitation to pause, to not have all the answers. It's a time to revisit things we thought were finished, to have conversations that maybe we avoided, to fix what's broken, and to rest. Mercury goes retrograde 3 to 4 times a year, and each retrograde happens in a different sign. And depending on that sign, the flavor of the retrograde changes. A Mercury retrograde in an earth sign like Virgo or Capricorn is going to feel more practical. Maybe we're reviewing our systems, our routines, our work. A Mercury retrograde in a fire sign like Aries or Leo might bring up issues around ego, identity, or passion projects. And then there's Mercury retrogrades in water signs, which we are in right now. Mercury in Pisces. And this one is not about logic, it is about feeling, it's about intuition, it's about things that you can't quite put into words. So if you've been feeling like you can't think straight, maybe your mind is feeling a little foggy, like you're moving through a dream, that's a feature of this retrograde. This retrograde is asking you to trust something other than your rational mind. I think one of the biggest myths about Mercury retrograde is that it's something to fear, that it's this awful thing that happens to you, but really it is an invitation. It is a chance to slow down in a world that never stops. It is a reminder that not everything needs to be figured out right now, and that sometimes going backwards is how you end up moving forward. So, yes, back up your files, double check your emails, give yourself a little extra time to get places, but don't spend the next few weeks in fear or anxiety. Spend them in reflection because that's what this time is truly for. All right, so now that we've debunked a few of those myths and talked about what Mercury retrograde actually is, let's dive into the specific energy of this retrograde. Because Mercury in Pisces is a whole different experience than Mercury in any other sign. Let's start with what Mercury does. Mercury is the planet of communication, thinking, processing information, learning, contracts, technology, short trips, and how we express ourselves. It's very logical, it's quick and analytical. Mercury wants things to make sense. It wants clear answers, clear communications, and clear pathways from point A to point B. Now let's talk about Pisces. Pisces is the last sign in the zodiac. It is ruled by Neptune. That is the planet of dreams, illusions, spirituality, and the disillusion of boundaries. Pisces is very intuitive, emotional, empathetic, artistic, and mystical. It's the sign of the ocean, deep, vast, and borderless. Pisces doesn't deal in logic, it deals in feeling, in knowing without knowing how you know. It's that space between waking and dreaming. So, what happens when you put Mercury, the planet of logic and clear communication, in Pisces, the sign of fog and feeling? Well, things get a little bit blurry. Mercury is not comfortable in Pisces. It's like trying to have a rational conversation underwater. The words get distorted. Things that seemed clear on the surface get murky. Your thoughts might start to drift. Your focus wanders. You start a sentence and forget where you're going with it. And when Mercury goes retrograde in Pisces, that fog gets even thicker. This is why communication during this retrograde might feel challenging. You might say something and realize that it came out completely differently than you intended. You might have a conversation with someone and walk away realizing that you both heard completely different things. Misunderstandings happen more easily because the energy of Pisces blurs the lines. It dissolves clarity. But here's the thing, and honestly, this is an important thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. We are so used to needing everything to be clear, concrete, defined. But Pisces teaches us that not everything can be put into words. Not everything needs to be logical. Some things can only be felt. So, yes, this retrograde might make it harder to think in a straight line, but it makes it easier to access your intuition. It also makes it easier to tap into the spiritual, the creative, the mystical parts of yourself that don't operate on logic. During Mercury retrograde in Pisces, your dreams might be more vivid as well. You might get downloads of information that you just can't explain. You might just know things without knowing how. Your psychic sensitivity is becoming heightened, and your connection to the unseen is stronger. This is a time where the veil between the conscious and the subconscious thins out. When you're getting messages not through your logical mind, but they're coming through your body, your feelings, your dreams, and your art. The invitation of Mercury retrograde in Pisces is to trust what you feel over what you think, to let yourself be in the fog without needing to force clarity, to communicate from the heart instead of the head, to let things get a little messy, a little undefined, and a little open to interpretation. Now, let's talk about some of the challenges because I'm going to be real with you. This energy can feel very disorienting. Pisces has no boundaries, it absorbs everything. So during this retrograde, you might feel extra sensitive to other people's energy. You might take on emotions that aren't yours. You might struggle to tell the difference between your intuition and your anxiety, or between what's real and what's fantasy. You might feel ungrounded, spacey, like you're floating instead of standing on solid ground. And if you're someone who likes structure, plans, and clear answers, this retrograde might drive you a little bit crazy. There's also a tendency during Mercury and Pisces to escape, to avoid difficult conversations, to say what you think people want to hear instead of what's true to you, or to simply just check out completely, scrolling, binge watching, numbing out, bed rotting, because the fog feels too overwhelming to navigate. And then there's a creative side to this whole thing. Pisces is one of the most creative signs, and Mercury retrograde is a time of revision. So if you're an artist, a writer, a musician, or a creative of any sort, this could be an incredibly fertile time for you. You might revisit old projects and see them with new eyes. You might channel something through you that feels like it's coming from somewhere beyond yourself. If you have Pisces placements in your chart, for example, your sun, your moon, your rising, or maybe even Mercury in Pisces itself, this retrograde is going to hit you just a little bit differently. You might feel it a little more intensely because Mercury is moving through your energy. You might feel extra foggy, extra emotional, extra sensitive. But you're also more equipped to navigate this energy because Pisces is familiar to you. You know how to move through the unclear. You know how to trust the feeling, even when logic might not be there. For those of you with strong Virgo placements, now that's Pisces' opposite sign, this might feel especially challenging. Virgo wants details, organization, precision. And Pisces is asking you to let that go, to trust the process even when you can't see the plan. Yes, it is uncomfortable, but it's also an opportunity to soften, to release some of that need for control and structure. And for everyone else, no matter what your chart looks like, this retrograde is asking you to lean into Pisces energy, to be okay with not knowing, to let yourself feel without needing to understand, to trust the flow and your intuition. And if you missed last week's episode on intuition, this is a great time to go back and listen to that as well. So that's the energy of Mercury retrograde in Pisces. Yes, it's foggy, it's emotional, it's also intuitive and creative. It can be a little bit chaotic, but yes, it's also deeply spiritual. It is a time to listen to the parts of yourself that don't speak in words, to honor the mystery, to let things unfold instead of forcing them into place. And we're not navigating this energy alone, okay? There is a lot happening astrologically during this retrograde. So let's talk about all of the other planetary movements that are layering into this experience, because when I tell you it is going to be an experience, oh, just wait. So let's start to walk through those, okay? One by one. We are going to talk about what each one of these transit means and how they're all working together. The first layer to this is Mars entering Pisces on March 2nd. Now, Mars is the planet of action, drive, motivation, desire, anger, and assertive energy. It's the warrior planet. It's how we go after what we want. It's how we fight. It's how we move forward in the world. Mars is very direct. It's fiery and it wants to act now. On March 2nd, Mars is moving out of Aquarius and into Pisces. And just like Mercury, Mars is not super comfortable in Pisces. When Mars is in a fire sign like Aries, or even in an air sign like Aquarius, it knows how to move a little more decisively. But in Pisces, Mars softens, it diffuses, the edges start to blur. Instead of direct action, you get passive action. Instead of clear anger, you get feelings that are hard to name or form. Mars in Pisces can feel like you're trying to run through water. You know, when you want to go somewhere, but it takes so much more effort to get there? Your motivation might feel inconsistent, and some days you are inspired and flowing, while other days you cannot seem to get anything done. But here's what Mars in Pisces does really well: it acts intuitively. It moves from a place of feeling rather than forcing. It's like spiritual action. It's compassionate action. It's acting on behalf of something that's bigger than ourselves. So during this time, you might feel called to take action that doesn't necessarily make logical sense, but it feels right in your heart and in your soul. You might find yourself fighting for something that you believe in on a spiritual or emotional level, or you might need to maybe set boundaries around your energy in a way that you haven't before. The shadow side of Mars in Pisces is passive aggression. Pisces doesn't like confrontation, and Mars needs some sort of outlet. So instead of direct communication, things can come out a little bit sideways. Resentment can build, anger tends to get swallowed instead of expressed, creating kind of a bubble. If you notice that happening, the invitation is to find healthy ways to release that energy. Movement, creative expression, water, literally or metaphorically, it can all help that flowness. And remember that this is all happening while Mercury is in retrograde. So your ability to think clearly about what you want and how to go after it is already compromised. Mars in Pisces is asking you to trust your instincts and move from your gut, not your head. Now, the second layer we have here is a lunar eclipse and a full moon, both in Virgo on March 3rd. So this is a big one, okay? We have this lunar eclipse and a full moon in Virgo, and eclipses are big game changers. Full moons are always about release, illumination, these endings. They bring things to the surface and they show you where things might be hiding in the shadows. They mark these major chapters and completions. But lunar eclipses take that energy and amplify it. Eclipses are faded, they are turning points. They bring sudden shifts, revelations, and closures that you might not have seen coming. Lunar eclipses specifically are about emotional release and letting go of what no longer serves us. And this eclipse is happening in Virgo. Virgo is the sign of details, organization, health, service, perfectionism, and practicality. It's an earth sign, so it is grounded, analytical, and focused on improvement. But Virgo wants everything to be clean, clear, and functional, and it is sitting directly opposite of Pisces. So we have this axis, Virgo and Pisces, order and chaos, control and surrender, details versus the bigger picture, the mind versus the heart, the tangible versus the mystical. I mean, we can go on and on about this axis. This eclipse essentially is asking you, where in your life have you been trying to control everything? Where have you been so focused on the details that you've lost sight of the meaning? And where do you need to let go and trust the flow? It's a push and pull energy. And because it's an eclipse, something is being released, something is ending, and it might not be subtle. You might have a realization about your health, your routines, your work, or the way that you've been serving others at the expense of yourself. You might see clearly where you've been overgiving or overanalyzing, or even trying to perfect something that was never meant to be perfect. And here's the thing, all of this again is happening during Mercury retrograde in Pisces, with Mars also in Pisces. So the energy is already so foggy and so emotional. And then this eclipse comes in and says, okay, now release it all. Yes, it is going to be intense and it is a lot, but it's also deeply clarifying because eclipses cut through the fog. They show you the truth even when you don't want to see it. So then we're going to shift gears a little bit with this next layer of Venus entering Aries on March 6th. Now, Venus is the planet of love, beauty, values, pleasure, money, and relationships. It's what you're attracted to and what attracts you. It's how you give and receive love. It's what brings you joy. Now, Venus has been in Pisces, which is actually one of its favorite signs. Venus in Pisces is soft, romantic, compassionate. It's unconditionally loving. It's the energy of soulmate connections, artistic inspiration, and seeing the divine in everyone. It's dreamy, it's giving, it's a little bit escapist. But on March 6th, Venus moves into Aries. And so the energy is going to completely shift. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It's bold, direct, passionate, independent, and sometimes impulsive. Venus in Aries knows what it wants and it goes after it. It's confident, it's fiery, it doesn't wait around for somebody to make the first move. It makes the first move. So during this time, your desires are going to get clearer. You might feel a surge of courage around going after what or who you want. You might be less willing to settle or compromise. You may even feel this pull to assert yourself in your relationships or your creative life. Venus in Aries can also be a little bit selfish, but in a really good way. It's about knowing your worth and not dimming yourself to make other people comfortable. It's about pleasure for yourself and not just for others. And again, this is happening in the middle of Mercury retrograde in Pisces. There's so much going on in this retrograde. So there's this interesting contrast with that. Your mind is still foggy and your communication is still unclear, but your heart knows exactly what it wants. So this could create some tensions. You might feel pulled to make a really bold move in a relationship, but Mercury retrograde is saying, wait, slow down. Just think about things. And the key here is to feel into it. If it's a genuine desire that's been building, honor that. But if it's an impulsive and reactive energy, maybe give it a couple more days. Venus in Aries is also great for creative projects, especially ones that require confidence and courage. If you've been holding back on putting your work out there, this transit is going to give you the push that you need. Okay, so now we're moving into this next layer. Jupiter is going direct on March 11th, and this is actually really good news. Jupiter has been in retrograde since November 2025. And when Jupiter is in retrograde, growth really slows down. Your expansion pauses, luck and opportunities feel like they're on hold. It's like a time of internal growth rather than the external progress. So on March 11th, when we see Jupiter go direct, the forward momentum is coming back, and it's definitely a little time to celebrate. Jupiter is the planet of expansion, abundance, growth, optimism, luck, and higher learning. It has great benefits. The planet brings in blessings. When Jupiter is direct, things start to open up. Doors that were closed start to open back up to us. Opportunities start flowing again. And this is happening right in the middle of Mercury retrograde, which is honestly kind of perfect because when Mercury is asking you to slow down and reflect, Jupiter is telling you, but don't worry, the growth is still coming. Jupiter going direct is also great for manifestation work because it really amplifies whatever you're putting out there. So if you've been doing the inner work during Mercury retrograde, reflecting, releasing, and revisiting, Jupiter going direct is when you start to see the fruits of that work. This is also a really good reminder that even during retrograde periods, not everything is on pause. Some things are still moving forward, blessings are still arriving. Jupiter going direct in the middle of this retrograde is like that little gift from the universe that says, "You're doing great. Keep going. We're almost there." And finally, we have the new moon in Pisces on March 19th. This is actually the last day of the Pisces season, and it is right before the spring equinox and the sun's move into Aries on March 20th, and also the day before the last day of this Mercury retrograde. So, new moons are always about new beginnings, setting intentions, and planting new seeds. They are the dark moon. It's that pause before the next cycle begins. And this new moon is happening in Pisces, the sign that we're swimming through this entire retrograde. A new moon in Pisces is deeply spiritual. It is a time to set intentions that might not make full logical sense, but it feels like it's the right thing. It feels true in our soul. It's about dreaming into the next chapter. And here's what makes this new moon extra potent. Mercury is still going to be in retrograde. Mercury doesn't technically go direct until that next day on March 20th. So this new moon is happening in this sort of in-between space. It's a threshold energy. So we're setting intentions, but we're doing it still in the fog. We're planting seeds, but we don't necessarily know the bigger picture yet. And that's an invitation in its own to trust, to surrender, to plant the seeds anyway, even when you can't see that bigger full picture. This is also going to be the final new moon before we shift into Aries season, which is all about initiation, action, and new beginnings. So, this Pisces new moon is kind of like a final exhale before the inhale. It's that sort of final big release before the rebirth happens. Use this new moon to journal, to meditate, to dream. Ask yourself what wants to be released and what wants to be planted. And then on the very next day, Mercury goes direct and the sun moves into Aries. The fog starts to lift, the energy shifts, and you step into this next chapter with more clarity and more fire. So that's what's happening during this Mercury retrograde. It is not just Mercury, it's Mars entering Pisces, softening our drive. It's a lunar eclipse in Virgo, releasing what no longer is aligned. It's Venus entering Aries, giving us courage and love. Jupiter's going direct, bringing luck back on our side. And it's that new moon in Pisces inviting us to dream into what's next. All of these transits are working together. They're layering, they're building, and they're all asking you to trust the process even when it's uncomfortable. All right, that was a lot. We've talked about what Mercury retrograde actually is. the specific energy of Mercury in Pisces, and all of those other planetary movements that are happening during this time. Now let's get practical, okay? How do we actually navigate this retrograde? What should we do? What should we avoid? And how can we use this time as the gift or invitation that it's meant to be? First things first, slow down. I know that sounds simple, but it is the most important thing. Mercury retrograde in Pisces is not the time to rush. It is not the time to force clarity when clarity isn't there yet. And it's definitely not the time to make a quick decision or push through the fog. It is a time to pause, to take your time, and to let things unfold at their own pace. Before you send that text, take a breath, reread it. Before you have that conversation, check in with yourself about what are you actually wanting to say and are you saying that? Before you make a decision, sit with it for a few extra days and see how it feels. The energy of Pisces wants you to slow down and feel into things. So give yourself permission to move at a slower pace than usual. Next, check in with your intuition before speaking or deciding. This ties into what we talked about in last week's episode. Your logical mind might not have all the answers right now, but your intuition does. Before you communicate something important, drop into your body. How does it feel to say this? Does it feel true? Does it feel aligned? Pisces is all about feeling and intuition, so this is the perfect time to practice trusting that inner knowing. If something feels off, honor that. If something feels right, even if you can't explain why, honor that too. Next, we are embracing creative expression and dream work. Mercury retrograde in Pisces is one of the most creative transits that we can experience. The veil between the conscious and the subconscious is so thin, which means that your access to inspiration, your imagination, and the mystical is so strong and heightened. This is a beautiful time for any kind of creative work, whether it's writing, painting, music, dance, whatever your medium is, let yourself channel it. You might be surprised on what comes through. I also highly recommend keeping a dream journal by your bed. Your dreams during this retrograde are likely to be very vivid, symbolic, and full of messages. Write them down as soon as you wake up, even if they don't make sense yet. The meaning might reveal itself later. And if you're someone who does any kind of intuitive or spiritual work, whether it's tarot, meditation, energy healing, this is a very strong time for that as well. You're more open, more receptive, and more connected to the unseen. Now, another thing we can be doing is revisiting old projects and practices. Remember, Mercury retrograde is all about those words: reflect, revise, revisit, return, release. So this is a great time to go back to creative projects that you started and maybe never finished, to reread books that meant something to you years ago, to revisit spiritual practices you used to do, but maybe you let them fall away. Maybe there's a piece of writing that you abandoned, or a painting that you left half done, or a song that you never finished. Pull it back out. Look at it with fresh eyes. You might see it differently now. You might actually have the clarity or the inspiration to complete it too. Or maybe there's a meditation practice, a ritual, a way of connecting with yourself that used to serve you, and maybe you let go of that. This is also a time to come back to it and see if it still resonates. We also want to be extra clear in our communications. This might seem contradictory because I just said that the energy is foggy, but that's exactly why you need to over communicate right now. Say what you mean. Don't assume people will read between the lines. Don't expect someone to just get it. Be as clear and direct as possible, even if it feels repetitive. If you're making plans, confirm them. If you're having an important conversation, follow up in writing so everybody's on the same page. If you're feeling something, name it instead of expecting the other person to just know it. Pisces energy can make communication a little bit slippery. Things can get lost in translation, so the clearer you can be, the better. And if someone says something that doesn't land right, ask for clarification. Don't just assume. Don't fill in the blanks with your interpretation, just ask. Another thing for this retrograde is expecting technology and travel hiccups and plan accordingly. This is just from personal experience. This is a classic Mercury retrograde energy and advice, but it is definitely worth repeating here. Back up your files, save your work frequently, double check your travel plans, and leave earlier than you think you need to leave. Things are more likely to go sideways during a retrograde. Remember, that's how it got this reputation. Flights do get delayed, emails don't send, your phone glitches, and your car will make a weird noise. Well, hopefully not, knock on wood. It's not the end of the world, but it is easier to deal with if you're prepared for it. So don't book a super tight connection if you're flying. Don't wait until the last minute to submit something important. Give yourself a little bit of a time, a little bit of a buffer. And if something goes wrong, take a breath. I know it's annoying, but it's also part of the process. Sometimes those delays and detours lead you exactly where you need to be. It's all divine timing. Another thing is let things be unclear. This is really hard for a lot of people, including myself, but it is so important during this retrograde. You don't have to have all the answers right now. You don't have to know exactly what you're doing or where you're going. Mercury retrograde in Pisces is asking you to sit in the mystery, to be okay with not knowing, to trust that clarity will come when it's meant to. If you're trying to make a big decision and you just can't get clear on it, that might be a sign that it's not time yet. Don't force it, let it marinate. Let the fog be fog. The answers will reveal itself when Mercury goes direct. And honestly, some things aren't meant to be clear. Some things are meant to be felt, not understood. Pisces teaches us that, and it teaches us that not everything needs to be defined or labeled or even figured out. Another thing, use this time for inner work, not an outer launch. Mercury retrograde is not the time to launch the big thing. It is not the time to start a new business, or release a new project, or make a huge public announcement. This is a time for behind the scenes work, for reflection, revision, preparation. If you've been working on something, use this retrograde to refine it, to go back through it, to make it better, to let it simmer a little bit longer before you share it with the world. And then when Mercury goes direct, that's when you launch. That's when you put it out there. But for now, keep it intentional. We also want to lean into the power of those words. Reflect. So we're journaling, meditating, thinking about where we've been and where we're going. We are revising. We're going back and editing, refining, improving. We are revisiting, returning to old projects, old practices, old places that meant something to you. We are releasing, letting go of what no longer serves us. That eclipse on March 3rd is especially good for this. And we're also resting, giving ourselves permission to do less, to sleep more, to take breaks. Mercury retrograde in Pisces is not a high energy time, so allow yourself to rest and restore. Now, here are a couple of things to avoid during this retrograde, okay? Try avoiding any signing of binding contracts if you can. If you absolutely have to, read everything 3 times and maybe have someone else look at it too. Details are easy to miss right now. Avoid making impulsive decisions, especially big ones. If it can wait, let it. Give yourself some time to sit with it. Avoid assuming you know what someone else is thinking or feeling. Ask, clarify, don't fill in the blanks. And avoid beating yourself up if you're feeling foggy, emotional, or unproductive. That is the energy right now. You are not doing anything wrong. You are just moving through a different kind of time, just like everybody else. Now, here are some rituals and practices that work really well with Mercury retrograde in Pisces energy. Take baths. Seriously, okay? Water is Pisces element, and baths are incredibly grounding and clearing during this time. Add salt, herbs, essential oils, light a candle, and just let yourself soak. Spend time in water if you can, okay? Any kind of water. If you can't go to a bath, go to the ocean, a river, a lake, even just sitting by a fountain, okay? Water helps you release what you're holding onto and it helps you reconnect to the flow. Journal with prompts like, what am I ready to release? What is my intuition trying to tell me? What old dream wants to be revisited? One of my favorites, pull tarot and oracle cards daily. Ask for guidance, let the cards speak to the part of you that doesn't need logic. And if you don't know how to read tarot and you would like to learn, go over to themagicsiren.com and sign up for April's tarot workshop. Something else we can do is create with our hands. Paint, draw, write, make music. Let it be imperfect. Let it be messy. Just flow through it. That creative expression will be so fulfilling in this retrograde. You can meditate or do breath work. Anything that helps you get out of your head and into your body will be really useful. And give yourself a lot of grace. This is not an easy transit. It is very beautiful and potent, but my goodness, it's a little bit disorienting. So be gentle with yourself. You know, I was actually born during a Mercury retrograde, and I have so much Gemini in my chart, which is ruled by Mercury. So retrogrades have always been interesting for me. Some people with Mercury retrograde in their birth chart actually find that retrogrades feel more natural to them than when Mercury is direct. And I've made some major life decisions during Mercury retrogrades that ended up being the best decisions I've ever made. Like the time that I wanted to move to a new country during a retrograde, my mom told me it is a bad idea. You need to wait until Mercury goes direct. But it felt right, and my intuition was clear, so I just went for it. And yes, there were hiccups. My first flight was delayed. I had to run through the airport to catch my next one as they're saying over the PA system, Alicia, gate 17, Alicia, gate 17. My luggage got broken. It was all classic Mercury retrograde travel chaos. But that move, it was exactly what I needed. It helped me close a chapter that I was done with and step into something completely new. Those delays and the chaos, it was part of the process, but it gave me time to really feel into this decision and trust that I was doing the right thing. So don't let the fear of Mercury retrograde stop you from living your life. Just move with awareness, more intention, and trust in your intuition. The key to navigating Mercury retrograde in Pisces is to work with the energy instead of against it. Slow down, feel into things, trust your intuition, and let yourself be in the mystery. Remember, it is temporary. Mercury goes direct on March 20th, and the fog will start to lift. But for now, just let yourself swim. So, I do want to take a minute and just kind of share an experience of Mercury retrograde in my own life because I think when we talk about astrology, it can feel theoretical. Like these concepts are floating out there in space somewhere, but these transits are lived experiences. They show up in real, tangible ways in our lives. And I think hearing how other people navigate them can make you feel less alone in whatever you're going through. Like I mentioned earlier, I was born in a Mercury retrograde, which means that in my natal chart, Mercury is in retrograde. And there is this idea in astrology that if you were born during a retrograde, you might feel a little more comfortable during retrograde periods than maybe when the planet is direct. And honestly, I think that's partially true for me. When Mercury is in retrograde, I feel like I can kind of be in my element. My brain works in this reflective, non-linear, let's go back and revisit kind of way naturally. So retrogrades don't throw me off as much as maybe they do someone else. But that doesn't mean that they're always easy, especially Mercury retrograde in Pisces. Because even though I'm comfortable with retrograde energy, Pisces energy can still feel so overwhelming for me. Some of these really big decisions that I decided to make during Mercury retrogrades, whether it was in Pisces or not, it felt like it was chaotic and there was so many things that could have gone wrong. But my intuition was so clear about all of these decisions, even with all the logical reasons not to do it. Even with people telling me to wait, I just knew that it was right. So I did these things anyway. And yes, there were hiccups, But those hiccups, like I said, were part of the process. They slowed me down just enough to really feel into what I was doing, to make sure that I wasn't rushing into something out of avoidance or escape. That move to that other country, that move to that island, all happening in those Mercury retrogrades, they ended up being the most transformative experiences of my life. It helped me shed chapters that I was ready to be done with, and it gave me space to rediscover who I was outside of all of the roles and expectations that I had been carrying. Would it have been different if I waited until Mercury was direct? Maybe, but I don't think so. I think that the retrograde energy was actually part of what made it so powerful because it forced me to move slowly, to be intentional, and to trust myself in a deeper way. I think one of the things that I've learned from working with Mercury retrogrades over the years is that they're not about avoiding life. It's not about putting everything on hold and hiding until the coast is clear. It's just about moving differently. It's about making decisions differently, about trusting yourself in a way that doesn't rely on external validation or logical certainty. And especially this Mercury retrograde in Pisces, it is all about trusting what you feel, even when you can't explain it. So I want to invite you to reflect on your own experiences with Mercury retrogrades. Think back to past retrogrades. What happened? How did you navigate them? Did you fight against it or did you flow with it? And if you fought against it, what would it have looked like if you flowed instead? Maybe you had a moment where everything went wrong and you were so frustrated, but looking back now, you can see that that was actually redirecting you towards something better. Maybe you had a conversation that felt confusing at the time, but later you realized it needed to happen that way. Maybe you're revisiting something from your past, a person, a place, a project, and it gave you closure or clarity that you didn't even know that you needed. Mercury retrogrades have a way of making sense in hindsight. In the moment, they feel chaotic, but when you look back, you can see a pattern. You can see how everything was unfolding exactly how it needed to. So, as you move through this retrograde, I want you to remember that you're not doing it wrong. If you're feeling foggy, emotional, uncertain, or like you can't think straight, that's just part of the energy. That's what this time is asking of you. And if something goes sideways, if plans change, if clarity doesn't come when you want it to, trust that that's for a reason. Trust that you are exactly where you need to be. Mercury retrograde isn't happening to us, it is happening for us. And the more that we can surrender to that, the more magic that we will find in all of the chaos. All right, so it's time to bring all of this together. Mercury retrograde in Pisces isn't just about things going wrong or technology breaking or your ex sliding into your DMs. It is so much deeper than that. This is a retrograde that is asking you to slow down, to feel instead of think, to trust your intuition over your logic, and to let yourself be in the mystery without needing all of the answers right now. We've got Mercury moving backward through the fog of Pisces. We've got Mars softening in Pisces, asking us to act intuitively instead of forcefully. We have a lunar eclipse in Virgo on March 3rd, releasing what no longer aligns. Venus is moving into Aries on March 6th, giving us courage in love and desire. Jupiter is going direct, yay, on March 11th, bringing growth and luck back into our life, and a new moon in Pisces on March 19th, inviting us to dream into what's next before the spring equinox shifts us into Aries season. It is a lot, it is intense, but it is also incredibly potent. It is a time of deep spiritual work, creative channeling, and emotional release. So, here's your practice for this retrograde. Pick one of the tools or practices we talked about today. Maybe it's slowing down before you communicate, maybe it's keeping a dream journal, or maybe it's revisiting an old creative project. Work with the energy instead of fighting it. Let yourself be in the flow, trust what you feel, and remember, Mercury goes direct on March 20th, the same day as the spring equinox. The fog will lift, the clarity will come, but for now, let yourself swim. Okay, so next week we are switching gears a little bit. We are going to be talking about how to work with the elements. earth, air, fire, and water. We're going to dive deep into what each element represents, how they show up in your spiritual practices, how they connect to astrology and the zodiac signs, how to call in elemental energy for different intentions, and how to find your dominant element. It is going to be a really grounding, practical episode after all of this Pisces fog, so make sure you tune in. Thank you so much for being here in the Siren Circle. I am so grateful that you are on this journey with me. If you are enjoying the podcast, please consider subscribing and share it with someone else who might enjoy it as well. And remember, you can always find me at themagicsiren.com if you want to book a tarot reading or join the next workshop. Until next week, trust the flow, honor the fog, and stay magical. Aloha.